Welcome to our weekly market review from a freezing Cape Town and Somerset West, proudly brought to you by ETM Analytics. I'm joined by Treasury One's Andre Salia as well. Andre, thank you very much for joining me. I know you're also freezing over there in Somerset West. It's definitely a cold snap for us down here. But 2024 has certainly been the year marked by numerous elections, and already several of those have shocked and rattled the cages of the political status quo. We saw it, for example, happening in India. We saw, the right-wing parties making inroads in the EU elections. We also obviously saw that happening in South Africa, France this weekend. And if last week's debate between Biden and Trump was anything to go by, we're likely to see a change in guard happening in the US later this year. But obviously, all of these shocks, these election shock outcomes, is creating a lot of market uncertainty. And one of them being the French ones, which kind of from week one, the previous round, the first round, going from very far right to a more leftist, centrist victory this past weekend for the lower house of parliament. And this past weekend's outcome in France has created a lot of uncertainty in the markets, and it really stems from the left side, having the majority in the lower parliament, and they're proposing obviously a lot of new spending measures and spending, pushing it into the economy, and this has markets concerned, especially the euro, right?
Yes. Good morning to everybody. The elections throughout the world is an interesting place, and I've now gone back a little bit and thought, why is these things, the election, so interesting at this point in time? And this is really after a COVID period. Now we go back 4 years, but during COVID we had seen lots of spending, lots of uncertainty. I think governments went through a period where it was something new, something that's never anybody faced before. But people down at the bottom end, your consumer, your normal human being, battling and going into difficult circumstances. I also think that period had changed life forever for a lot of people. And if I then look at elections coming through now, it appears to me that people are voting for change. That's what they want to see. They want to see a better life, and they take the elections and the vote that they can go and cast as a period where they can vote for change. And I'm wondering whether that doesn't have a lot to do with the volatility and the change that we see in how people react to the elections. But having said that, we've seen, interestingly, in the UK and in France, that people vote for that change, but the French elections was an interesting one. They have a two-stage election, and from the one to the other, they went from far right to far left. And one wonders whether the change to the left in the UK didn't influence this one. But this puts the French people or the French president in a difficult position, because there's no unity. So we've spoken about our government of national unity, that I don't call government of unity, because there is no unity. There's cooperation that needs to take place. And I think very much the same will be the case for the French people. They will have to get a government together that works together. Unity they will not have, but they have to work together. But that's got the impact on the euro, and we've seen the euro losing some ground over the weekend after the results came out. And then over in the UK, there we've seen a landslide victory for the leftist Labour Party. but a leftist Labour Party that I cannot compare to a Labour Party of 20 years back. A Labour Party that I think is also moving more to the centre than moving to the left. So it's a different Labour Party. We can expect different outcomes, but at least they've won the election with an absolute landslide victory. Once again, that vote for change that came in. And that would make it easier for them to pass bills and to bring their manifesto, what they want to do into the forefront and push it through government, different from what would be happening in France. So I think some stability in the UK, most probably benefiting the pound. What happens in Europe, not so good for the euro, not so good for passing legislation.
It's definitely a new era in UK politics, but they have been dealing British prime ministers like Uno cards in the past 2-3 years. I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, we've gone through prime ministers in that country. So you kind of hope for some stability for the UK to come. And then we also have the US elections happening in November. And I mean, that's a crazy story all on its own. You have one president still kind of fighting in court. And then you have Joe Biden, who, despite the Democrats coming out very strongly after last week's debate, saying, hey, we have no plans to recall this president or their candidate at this point in time. And I do think that they are running with this communication strategy that they kind of saying that everything is okay. But behind the scenes, I suspect that there's a lot of jockeying happening to finalize who could replace Joe Biden as a candidate for later this year. And once they have that nomination, once they have finalized that, I suspect we will see a recall of Joe Biden. I will put a lot of money down to say that I suspect that he won't run in November. I'm pretty sure that he's out. There's been a lot of criticism coming out of the Democratic ranks for Joe Biden. So definitely a last-ditch uncertain election outcome waiting for 2024. I mean, it's crazy. But sticking to the US, we saw US non-farm payrolls coming out last week above expectation. We're expecting a slight drop in inflation, but not marginally so, which means we can expect Powell to continue with higher rates for longer, as we say every week.
I'm laughing because you used the words, Joe Biden will not be running in the election. He will certainly not be running in the election. He might be standing as the candidate, but he will not be running. US non-farm payrolls slightly above expectation, but at the same time, unemployment up a little bit to 4.1%. What does that tell us? There is still some jobs, but we've spoken about this. It is high holiday season, so a lot of temporary jobs. But what the figures are really telling us is more and more headwinds are hitting the US economy. Things that we've spoken about, I've referred to grasping at straws, but there's another little straw coming up that we can grab onto and hold onto. I think we will see a change, and we've heard a change in the rhetoric speech that normally comes from Mr. Powell. So I think we are heading closer to interest rate cuts. August, high holiday season for them, part of July as well. But I think when they come back and they have their meeting in September, I would not be too surprised to see that there's a cut in interest rates with a possibility of a second one later in the year then. So that's also what the market tells us. And we expect the inflation data that is to come out to be slightly positive in the sense that we expect the inflation to come down from 3.2 to 3.1. But we've also spoken about this month-on-month figures before. and the previous months was relatively high. So as long as inflation is downward and slowly moving downward, I think we're heading to interest rate cuts.
And lastly, for the South African rand, it strengthened last week on the back of the cabinet announcement, some clarity at least out of our elections. We're also obviously holding our breath to see how our government will be able to function, whether or not they will be able to function together. They're having their first cabinet lekgotla this week. So is the rand waiting for that, or what are we expecting it to do?
I think the rand is in a fairly good band at the moment. I don't think markets expect any big changes by government immediately. We will now have to watch closely how they work together, not in unity, but simply working together. But no changes can be happening within a week. So I don't think that the market expects that. And I think the market is now focusing a little bit more on what happens internationally. And in the weeks and months ahead, I think that's what the case will be. And then we'll slowly see how things filter through. We are almost in the mid of winter. And a positive thing is that we still have no load shedding. That's got a very good and positive effect on the rest of the winter, and then we go into our spring period. And if Eskom holds it together, brings down the cost of doing business for people in South Africa, brings down our inflation rate because companies do better, less need to burn diesel and increase prices to get their money back. I think those positive spin-offs could be very good for the economy. I also think that could help our inflation rate. And if that happens, and if the United States of America cut interest rates by September, then we're in for a possible cut or two. And that will once again bring a good feel for the consumer and overall good for the economy. And that could simply mean that the rand remains in this band that we've spoken about last week, 1750, 1850.
Well, let's see how that cabinet plays out. We've spoken a lot about politics. By the way, ETM, we spoke to Jaco Kleinhans from the Solidarity Movement on the rise of the right-wing politics that we're seeing throughout Europe and the possible policy implications of that. It is available on our YouTube channel under Markets Magnified. Go check it out. Andre, stay warm, don't freeze. I believe this weather will eventually pass for us, but other than that, we will chat again next week.
As long as the dams fill up in the Western Cape, let it rain.
Cheers.
Thank you.